Hey there, new and returning viewers. This is Chris with D'Angelo's Woodcraft. I've got a quick one for you today that is a culmination of what I learned while trying to make a bench dog / MFT grid on my new workbench. While I could have picked up the first jig, router bit, whatever I found, I wanted to make sure I could complete this task with some level of accuracy, a high degree of efficiency, and perhaps most importantly, keeping the cost under $100. Finding a solution that would accomplish all three of these goals actually wound up requiring a bit of digging and research, but I figured something out and wanted to share that with you all so you have a straightforward, tried and tested method to create an MFT tabletop. So let's get right into it. This jig I designed, 3D printed, and am now selling on my Etsy for cheaper than any other jig I've seen available. I'll be going more into detail on the specs here in a minute, but let's talk about the initial holes I cut out first. As you can see, my vise has a pop-up dog in it for holding wider boards while planing or sanding. I wanted a row that would be in line with this dog, so I put a square in my vise to create a marking, then roughly align the center holes with that line. I also created a mark for where I wanted to place the jig vertically, which is completely up to you, but here I was mainly looking to avoid my dog holes running into the frame of the workbench. Then, using some double-sided tape and a square referencing the table edge, I lined the jig up and stuck it down. Now there were a couple different router and drill bits I tried. It should be noted that because this is a 1.5 inch MDF tabletop, I couldn't get all the way through with my router and needed to drill the rest of the way through. For my first holes, I used this 20mm boring bit and a beefy 20mm brad point bit, but I didn't really like this option for two reasons. One, the boring bit required I buy a metric collet for my router, and two, the brad point bit had a tendency to wobble around, inadvertently widening the tops of my dog holes. Instead, what I'd recommend is this router bit from Trend, which is specifically designed for plunge cutting 20mm dog holes. What's also nice about this bit is that it has a 1/2 inch collet, which you should already have. The jig I made is meant to be used with a 7/8 inch inner diameter / 1 inch outer diameter guide bushing. And to prevent burning, you're going to want to turn your router speed down quite a bit. This bit was also nice because it is quite long and allowed me to cut further through my 1.5 inch tabletop. But even with this additional depth, I needed to get a 20mm Forstner bit to finish out the holes. This is where I make a point that if you can, it makes some sense to make your tabletop 3/4 of an inch for MFT style tops, but there are workarounds for something thicker. Once those first holes are cut out, there are a couple different ways you can use the 4 provided indexing pins. Option 1 is to use 4 reference points, allowing you to cut just one additional row before the template has to be moved. This reduces any slop in the jig quite well, and I like to call this the slow but accurate method. Option 2 is the fast but inaccurate method. With 3 indexing pins in a row, the jig is fairly free to move, and unless you're on a very tight time constraint, I wouldn't recommend it. And finally, there's option 3, which takes the best of both worlds, opening up 5 holes per template move and reducing a lot of slop in the jig. I'd likely recommend option 1 as the only setup option you use, but feel free to do as you please. While I show you this jig in action, I want to make a point about using 20mm dog holes instead of 3/4 inch. Part of the reason figuring this dog hole routing task out was difficult is because 20mm router bits aren't as common in the US. But despite these challenges, I chose 20mm because there are more precision and well thought out accessories for this size. Although I haven't used them yet, UJK and Festool are excellent manufacturers for these accessories, and even though I don't want to splurge on those brands yet, it's nice to know my benchtop is ready for them if I ever do. I should also point out the spacing between holes in this jig is 96mm on center, which has become a standard spacing for 20mm dogs. Originally set by Festool with their MFT tables, it has now become widely accepted as the standard for any MFT style top. So, disclaimer time. While this jig is fairly accurate and quite efficient, I was able to knock out these 180 dog holes in 3 or 4 hours. Some of the dogs were dead square to each other, and some of them were not, being off anywhere between 1/32 of an inch to a 1/16 of an inch over a 24 inch run. So if you are experienced with MFT tops and looking for a truly accurate and precise MFT, this jig is likely not for you. In fact, and to prove I'm not just out for your money, I'll leave a couple recommendations in the description if you're looking for something spot on. But it should be noted, that precision and accuracy comes with a much higher price tag. My jig is intended to offer an entry point for people looking to put dog holes in their workbench and experiment with the usefulness of an MFT. Before we wrap up, there are also 2 optional steps I took, but I'd likely recommend them both. With a 45-degree chamfer bit, I put a very small chamfer on all the dog holes to clean up that laminate top and increase the durability of the holes. I also purchased this 20mm dog hole reamer from UJK, which was actually quite inexpensive compared to everything else they sell. And this was to ensure the holes were exactly 20mm and would fit my dogs and other accessories with less binding. Anyways, that's all I got for you on this. I hope this video is informative, and if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out in the comments. Also, if you liked the video, please leave a like and consider subscribing.